Today we are continuing the NHL offseason plan series. We're now reviewing the 31st ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Arizona Coyotes. What do they have to look forward to this offseason? What are the top most burning questions facing the franchise as we move into the summer? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're continuing our NHL offseason plan series and discussing the Arizona Coyotes. We started this series yesterday with the Montreal Canadiens, who were ranked number 32nd in the league, versus the bottom of the basement. Today we work our way up to number 31, the Arizona Coyotes. So in case you didn't catch yesterday's video, and I will have Montreal's video linked in the YouTube cards, so you can check that out if you haven't already. Essentially, we're breaking this into 4 segments. First up, we're going to review quickly the stats from the regular season. Secondly, we're going to take a look at the cap space situation facing the team this offseason. Thirdly, we're going to take a look at all the expiring contracts they have to deal with that are coming up in the RFAs or UFAs and how they might go about signing or replacing some of those players. And then lastly, in the 4th segment, we're going to look at the top burning questions and the biggest objectives facing the franchise during the offseason. So let's get started with the regular season review here for the Arizona Coyotes. Of course, we know it was not a good season if they're ranked 31st in the league. Not too many things went overly well. They had a record of 25, 50, and 7. They were ranked 30th in the power play at a measly 13.9%. PK wasn't much better at 29th in the NHL, 75%. They were the lowest scoring team in the NHL, only scoring 206 goals while allowing 309 goals against, which was the 30th best in the NHL. So that's well over 100 negative goals against that. They're more than the goals for. So that's really not good at all. Of course, they had a new head coach in Andre Tourigny, and I don't blame any of the results on him. He really wasn't given much of a roster to work with here. Clearly, this team has been gutted with a lot of its top talent, and they're going to continue to likely do so here as we go into this offseason. When we get into the burning question segment here, there's a lot here that could see more players of better quality leave town. So obviously we know it was a terrible season. We saw a few trades, nothing too substantial though. We're bound to see a little bit more here as we continue on into the offseason. Now let's take a look at their cap space situation. If this team actually has all kinds of cap space because they have all kinds of expiring contracts. So right now for next season, they only have a commitment of $48.48 million. So that means they have over $34 million available in salary cap space. So that is a substantial amount. They have all kinds of flexibility. And we'll take a look here next at the contract situation that's coming up between the RFAs and UFAs and see how they might allocate some of that money. How much of that money are they actually going to spend? That's a real tough question that we'll get into here a little bit later as well. So now let's move into segment 3 and take a look at their contract situation. Certainly the next segment with the burning questions will be the lengthier segment here of the video. But looking at the RFAs here first, we have forward Lawson Crouse and Barrett Hayton, along with Christian Fischer, defenseman Kyle Capobianco, and Cam Dineen. So there's a pretty good chance that majority of these players are qualified and re-signed. I know there was a lot of talk about Lawson Crouse around the NHL trade deadline. There was a lot of interest. He hit 20 goals this year, so he's certainly a player who's improved a lot and has developed into a pretty good, almost like a power forward type of player, you could say. So as somebody that Arizona could have traded and chose not to, they decided he was going to be one of the younger players to stick around and help move this team forward. Barrett Hayton, of course, a really high pick from a number of years back during the John Chayka era, slowly coming into his own, but certainly has more progress to make in that regard. Christian Fischer, I said most of these players would be qualified. I'm not 100% though on Christian Fischer. To be honest, he's been underwhelming to say the least, and he has not really lived up to expectations. I mean, he could be qualified just for the sake of needing enough warm bodies on this team. Like, it's really debatable who's on this roster next year. So they might keep him around for a short-term contract, maybe. but it's not even a given that that's going to happen. Kyle Capobianco probably gets qualified. Cam Dineen, debatable as well. On the UFA side of things, I'm not sure that any of these players are going to be back. Maybe one or two. Phil Kessel, obviously another player who we were expecting to be traded at the deadline. Never happened, mostly due to his contract. And obviously, teams would have had to eat too much money here on the cap to take him on. Arizona could not retain salary on Phil Kessel, mainly because, unless they would have had to trade him sooner, because they retained salary on too many other contracts. You can only have retained salary on 3 contracts at any given time. So by the time they get around to pushing harder to trade Kessel, because they didn't really have any offers they liked before that, they couldn't do it because they couldn't retain. And then, of course, you get Louis Eriksson, Antoine Roussel, and Jay Beagle, who all came from Vancouver in the Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Connor Garland deal. That contract, like that deal right now, to me, for Arizona's sake, is looking really good. They get out of the Ekman-Larsson contract, who had all kinds of term and money left on it, for 1 year of Louis Eriksson, Antoine Roussel, and Jay Beagle. I mean, there was other pieces involved here, but for really that worked out well. Those guys, I wouldn't think any of them would be back. I'd be quite surprised if they were. Alex Galchenyuk's also went on an expiring deal. Maybe he resigns. I'm not sure that they really need him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, has not done well the last few years. The best he did was the brief amount of time he was with the Leafs, and then he went back to Arizona and then didn't really have a good year. So I don't know. Boko Imama is a Group 6 UFA, so he's only a UFA because he hasn't played enough NHL games. He only got his first game or two here late in the season, and he did well. So I wouldn't be shocking if maybe he had a bigger role next year. I would really like to see him get a full-time spot. I hope that they'll offer to re-sign him. Time will tell if that's the case. Anton Strawman, can't see him going back. Harry Sateri, the goaltender who came over from Europe, that's a possibility because they are going to need a couple of goalies. So, I wouldn't be shocked if he signs another 1 or 2 year contract with Arizona. But then again, he might not because he originally signed with the Leafs, right? So that's really wasn't his intention of playing in Arizona. But I guess it's going to depend on where he gets the contract and who's willing to sign him. So he tests for agency and goes back if nothing else comes up. I don't know. I'm not really sure how the Coyotes feel about him. He's kind of such a small sample size, it's hard to predict. And there's also Dmitry Yaskin, who didn't really put up much of anything, and then, of course, didn't play a lot this year. So I don't know if he goes back to the KHL or if they consider keeping him around because I can't see it. But like I said, most of these UFAs are probably not going to be back, with maybe Imama, maybe Sateri. But that's about it. So they have a lot of expiring deals, hence all the cap space that's available. Now, what are the top burning questions facing the Coyotes franchise as we head into the full swing of the offseason? And the number one, by far, the biggest question over this franchise, which has been there for some time and will really hopefully get more of a clarity, more answers this offseason, will be the status of their new arena. Of course, we know that they're no longer playing at Gila River Arena. That time has come to a close, and they're going to be moving to ASU come the fall. Now, of course, they may even be delayed getting in there, so they may even have to start on a road trip. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. We'll have to get more details on that a little bit later into the summer, but for right now, they're still trying to get approval for their new arena to be built in Tempe. All of that is before Tempe City Council. We don't have a decision yet, but we likely will hear probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks that we're expected to get more information. I mean, what if, and this is a big what if the deal didn't get approved? That would be a disaster for this franchise. And I would assume at that point, the NHL would then have to probably seriously look at a relocation. I know they don't want to do that. The owner doesn't want to do that, but it might come to that if this arena deal doesn't work out. Now, at this point, we don't have any information to suggest that it won't. We do know that once it was proposed to City Council, everything was submitted. We know the last update was that they had some questions and some concerns, and they're doing their best to try to overcome that. So we don't really know how the answers to those questions and concerns are going to be perceived and looked upon by those making the decisions and voting on whether or not to proceed here with this deal. This is not the first time that the Tempe area has tried to develop this area of land where the arena would go, and it's had run into difficulties before. So we will see, but the status of this new arena deal is paramount for this franchise. If they can get approval, it'll give the players that are there to some degree, because a lot of them won't really be around when a new arena is built, but at least it gives everybody a little bit more sense of security, a little bit more optimism that the franchise has a better shot at surviving and sticking around in the state of Arizona. But if the deal falls apart for whatever reason, and we will likely know the answers to all that this summer, it could be disastrous, and we could be looking at a whole other thing here where the team might not have a choice but to relocate. Now, the burning question number 2 is, with all this cap space and all these roster spots available, can they sign free agents? Will they have issues attracting players to come play for the Coyotes? Obviously, going into the ASU arena with a 5,000 seat capacity. I mean, it might even be less than that with the NHL standards. We don't know. We know it's going to be a maximum of 5,000. Some say it could be closer to 4,000 or a little bit less. Time will tell once we get clarity on that. But it's been reported by different NHL insiders talking to different agents and things like that there's a lot of agents that will not recommend their players sign in Arizona. Now, of course, there's going to be some guys, and we're not talking high-end top talent here. We're talking either veteran players that are just happy to be sticking around, or younger players that are just happy to be there, that would normally be lower-level talent that are probably going to take contracts there if they can get it, because they're not going to be as fussy. But when it comes to getting actual, higher-end talented players, to be honest, I don't think the Coyotes are really all that interested in that right now anyways. To me, I'm not sure that they're going to spend a lot of money in free agency. The free agents that they do get are probably going to be people that sign 1 or 2 year contracts for league minimum to $1 million. They might get a few of those, but I honestly do think that they are going to have concerns and difficulty signing players at a free agency, except for some lower level talent that may not be as picky because they're just happy to have an NHL opportunity, because there are players like that. They will take whatever they can get to keep their careers alive, which is understandably something that you'd expect them to do. Burning question number 3 is, will we see them hit the cap floor by taking on other teams' bad contracts? Are we going to see some Coyotes trades that involve them picking up contracts that are likely going to be on long-term injury reserve for the remainder of time? Because this will help them get to the cap floor, and will help them spend, their active players can all be paid less money. So if they had a roster full except for a few players of making, league minimum to $1 million, they're going to have a hard time hitting the cap floor. But if they can get a couple of contracts, 1 or 2, of decent value that are not going to play, then there's that, right? So like Shea Weber, for example, quite likely gets traded from Montreal to Arizona for that purpose. It's going to help them get to the cap floor. Really, for Weber, he's not going to play again, so he's not going to really care who's paying him. If anything, he's going to probably get a raise because of the difference in taxes between the state and Arizona compared to Montreal and Quebec, where they would be more heavily taxed. So obviously, they're going to do things like that. I'm not sure what other contracts they can look at besides Weber, but I fully suspect that's going to be something we see. The Coyotes complete a trade or two to acquire those contracts, and I would not be surprised if we also see them be fairly active within the trade market, because as I mentioned in one of the other questions, I think they're going to have a really hard time signing free agents to fill out their roster. So doing it through trade is going to be easier for players who don't have trade protection, that they don't have to worry about vetoing a trade. They can basically force them to come to Arizona by picking them up in a trade. And of course, if they want to get paid and continue to play, they won't have a choice but to go. So to me, we're going to probably see some more of that. Burning question number 4 is, will we finally see a Jacob Chychrun trade? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think it's definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of when and where he goes. Because if you listen to Chychrun himself at the season's end, he certainly made it known based on his comments without actually saying so. He was pretty direct and making it sound like he definitely wants out of Arizona, that he wants to be able to play meaningful games. He doesn't want to be packing it in year after year. He's only 23, going to be going on 24 with I think it's 3 years left on his contract. A real good defenseman. And he didn't have a great season this year. From the Coyotes' perspective, they probably don't want to sell low, but they're looking for a big package to make this trade happen, looking at 3 to 4 assets. It's going to be a lot. They might not get as much as they were hoping for, but at the end of the day, we talk with teams in California, whether it be the Ducks or the Kings, a few other teams out in the East as well, depending on who ends up doing what other moves here. There's bound to get to a point where there's a decent amount of interest. There still is on this player, but a Jacob Chychrun trade will land the Coyotes another, 3 to 4 real solid assets to help them build for the future. And I think we're finally going to see that come. Now, burning question number 5 is just how bad is this team going to be? And I hope Coyotes fans aren't offended by this because it's just the nature of the situation. Obviously the Coyotes are ranked 31st right now. They have the second best odds for the first overall pick in the 2022 NHL Draft. And I would fully suspect that they're going to be right around the bottom of the league again next year for the 2023 draft and be talking about the sweepstakes for Connor Bedard. Of course, the draft lottery is another big question for them. Where are they going to end up picking in this draft? I don't see a scenario where they trade the pick. They really need some higher end prospects. So picking at whether it be 1, 2, 3, they're guaranteed top 4 because they can only move down a maximum of 4 spots if they have bad luck and don't win either of the top 2. So they're going to get a real good player here. This player that they get in this draft, if they're picking at 3 or 4, may not be going straight to the NHL. Hard to say. Even if they were to win and get first overall, it's not a given that Shane Wright would go straight to the NHL either, in my opinion, especially with depending on what question marks there are around this franchise. It wouldn't be shocking if he waited a year just to get more clarity on the franchise's future. You don't know. I hope they don't run into a situation like we saw all those years ago with Eric Lindros not wanting to report to Quebec. He drafted first overall and he wouldn't report. I don't have any reason to suggest that's going to happen, but with a lot of questions right now over the future of the franchise, I have to think that some of these players in junior, probably do have concerns, and rightfully so. And once we get further along here, and if we have an approved arena deal and things, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you can see a vision on how it's going to, stay in Arizona and be successful, then all that's going to go away. But we just need some more questions answered before we get to that point. But in all honesty, I fully suspect the Coyotes to be just as bad or worse next year as they were this year. They're going to be historically bad. I don't see any scenario where they're really going to have a whole lot of talent on the ice. They're going to win a few games here and there because their young players are going to be working hard. But otherwise, it's really not going to be a promising year in Arizona at all. I would suspect that they may have trouble selling tickets at ASU. I don't know. I mean, the ticket prices that we've seen so far look like an average ticket was going to be around $150. And if their quality on ice product is not all that good and they're not winning very many games and there's not a lot of exciting young players to see just yet, they're going to have a tough time selling tickets. I would hope it wouldn't get to the point that they would struggle in a small building like that because they're already going to be not making a ton of money. They're already, on the revenue sharing at the league, getting the maximum amount paid through that program. So they really can't afford to have it really fail that much worse. But at the end of the day here, it's just one of those things that this is an unprecedented thing. You're going to see an NHL team playing in a 5,000 or less seat arena. I've been watching, locally here in the province of New Brunswick where I live, between going to watch either the St. John Sea Dogs or the Moncton Wildcats, which are both pretty close to me, and their arenas for major junior hockey. And those arenas are the Moncton Arena, that's pretty new. It's almost double the size of the Arizona Arena, and the St. John Arena is slightly bigger as well. Some of the junior arenas in other parts of Canada are double or even in some cases triple the size of the attendance for what they're going to have at ASU. So it's real tough to see some of these players playing junior hockey in much bigger buildings that are full and then get drafted and go there to a much smaller setting. Now, I know some people are saying it's going to be a more intimate setting. It could be a unique, cool experience, and maybe that'll be the case, but it just is so different and unheard of that it's one of those things that it's hard to be optimistic about it, to be completely honest. I know some of the locals and the local fans who want to keep their team probably have an easier time being optimistic about it, and I get that. I'm not trying to be extremely negative here. This is just the facts on the team and where things are at. This is going to be a pivotal summer in the existence of this franchise, whether or not it can remain in the state of Arizona and have a chance to be successful and viable on a long-term basis. A lot of questions are hopefully going to be answered here in the near future, so we can start, either one way or another, figure out the long-term solution for this team. So let me know your thoughts on what to expect from the Coyotes in the offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.